The massive Valorian warship hung in the darkness above, Earth like an executioner's blade waiting to fell commander. Jakara stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the blue planet turn slowly beneath. Her fleet 73 ships from the two galactic councils surrounded the human homeworld, and each one carried enough firepower to crack continents. This should have been simple. Council had done this a dozen times before with primitive species who didn't understand their place in the SP. A place in the galactic order. Humans were newcomers and troublesome ones. At that, they had joined the Council only 40 years ago, and in that time, they had spread across their solar system like a virus there. Ships crowded the space lanes and their merchants undercut. Established trade routes, their diplomats asked too many questions, and their scientists wanted access to technologies they hadn't earned. Worst of all, they occupied a star system that sat at the intersection of three major jump routes. The Council wanted that system and the resource-rich planets that orbited its yellow sun. Send for their ambassador, Jakara, commanded her second officer, bowed and transmitted the message within. The hour a small human shuttle approached the flagship's Kara. Watched it come and felt a familiar contempt. Humans were so small and fragile, and yet they acted as if they belonged among the great species of the galaxy. Airlocks cycled, and Dr. Sarah Chen walked onto the bridge. She was a middle-aged woman, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines of exhaustion around her eyes. She had been Earth's chief diplomat for 7 years, and Zia Chikara had met her many times at council sessions, always smiling and always trying to find common ground, and always failing to understand that the strong took what they wanted. Commander Zia Chikara, Sarah said with a slight bow that somehow managed to convey respect without submission. I hope we can resolve this peacefully. JKR's jaw plates clicked in what might have been amusement. There is nothing to resolve, Ambassador, she said. The Council has voted, and the decision is final. Your species will evacuate the Sol system within 72 hours. You may take whatever you can carry on your colony ships. Planets and stations will become Council property. Sarah's face went pale, but she kept her composure. Commander, you know we cannot evacuate 8 billion people in 3 days, she said. We have nowhere to go, and no ships large enough for such an exodus. This is a death sentence for our species. Then surrender your weapons and accept Council occupation, Jakara replied. Your people will be relocated to designated worlds where you can be properly supervised. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, Zeta Chikara saw something she hadn't expected. Not fear or desperation, but a deep and terrible sadness. We came to the stars, hoping to find friends. Sarah said quietly, we shared our art and our music and our dreams. We followed every rule and honored every treaty. We asked for nothing but a chance to prove ourselves worthy of standing beside you. She pulled a small data chip from her pocket and held it up. This contains the complete works of human literature. From the past 5,000 years, she continued, poetry and philosophy and stories of hope and courage. I brought it to show you who we really are. To show you what you're destroying. Jakara waved a dismissive claw. I have no interest in primitive scribbling, she said. You have your ultimatum, Ambassador, 72 hours. Sarah looked at the chip in her hand for a long moment, and then let it fall to the deck. It bounced once and rolled to a stop near Jakara's feet. Then I have a message for the Council. Sarah said. Her voice had changed and become flat and cold. Humanity tried peace. We extended our hand in friendship and you spat on it. We offered cooperation and you demanded submission. We came in hope and you answered with threats. She turned toward the airlock and paused. You should have accepted our friendship, Commander, she said without looking back, because now you're going to meet the other side of humanity. The side we tried very hard to leave behind. The shuttle departed, and Jay Skara watched it go. She felt the faintest flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. Humans were emotional creatures and prone to dramatic gestures. 72 hours they would surrender, or die. Either way, the Council would have what it wanted. Countdown began on Earth. The message spread like wildfire through every city and colony. Admiral James Kowalski stood in the Joint Command Center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, and watched the tactical displays around him. Hundreds of officers worked in controlled chaos and coordinating the movements of ships and weapons that had been hidden for years. Status, he said. Lunar batteries are charged and ready, sir. reported his tactical officer. Mars defense grid is online. Asteroid platforms report. Green across the board, the civilian evacuation. We've moved everyone we can to the deep shelters, sir, came the reply. The rest have volunteered to man the surface defenses. Kowalski nodded slowly. He was an old man now, and had spent 40 years. In Earth's military, he had been a young lieutenant when humanity first met the Council. He had watched with hope as the diplomats promised a new era of peace and prosperity among the stars. He had watched that hope curdle into bitter understanding. As the Council showed its true nature, the strong devoured the weak in this galaxy. There was no justice, and no mercy, and no reward for virtue there. It was only survival, sir. The deadline is approaching. His communications officer said the Council fleet is moving into bombardment positions. Kowalski looked at the chronometer. Savanti 2. Mars had passed. He opened the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Kowalski to all units. He said. His voice was calm and steady. For 40 years we've played the role of the grateful primitives. We smiled and bowed and pretended to be less than we are. We did this because we hoped that peace was possible. That hope died today. He paused and let the weight of those words settle. What the Council doesn't know is that we've spent those 40 years preparing for this moment. Every diplomatic mission was an intelligence operation. Every cultural exchange was reconnaissance. Every treaty negotiation gave us access to their technology and their weaknesses. Study them, and we learned, and we built. Now they're going to learn something about humanity. We are the descendants of warriors and survivors. Our ancestors fought their way out of caves and across continents. They survived ice ages and plagues, and wars that burned entire civilizations to ash. We carry that legacy in our bones. The first Council ships opened fire there. Particle beams lanced down through the atmosphere and struck the defensive stations that orbited Earth. Explosions bloomed in the darkness, and debris scattered across the orbital. Neshkara watched from her command throne and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had chosen annihilation, sir, her sensor officer said. Suddenly I'm reading energy spikes across the lunar surface, multiple launch signatures from Mars. Unknown contacts emerging from the asteroid belt. Evasive action. Zia Chikara snapped, but it was too late. The moon seemed to erupt as hundreds of hidden weapons platforms revealed themselves. Kinetic rounds accelerated to impossible speeds and crossed the distance in seconds. 3 Council ships simply ceased to exist as depleted uranium penetrators tore through their hulls. The Martian defense grid launched a swarm of missiles that wove through space in patterns too complex to be random. They were guided by artificial intelligence that adapted and learned with each microsecond. Council's point defense systems tried to respond, but the missiles split into submunitions and then split again. By the time they reached the fleet, each missile had become a cloud of smart fragments that found seams in armor and vulnerable sensor arrays. From the asteroids came ships that had been disguised as mining vessels. They shed their camouflage and revealed weapons that shouldn't have existed. Human science had taken 40 years of Council technology and weaponized it in ways the original creators had never imagined. As Kara gripped her command throne as her flagship shuddered under the impact of human fire. Return fire, she roared. All batteries target the planet. But the human ships were already moving and flowing through the Council formation like wolves among sheep. They didn't fight with honor or, according to the established rules of galactic warfare, they struck and vanished and struck again from unexpected angles. They used the Council's own ships as cover and exploited every moment of hesitation. Admiral Kowalski watched the battle unfold and felt no triumph, only grim necessity. Send the message, he said. His communications officer nodded and transmitted on all frequencies. Message was simple and clear. We tried peace now. You'll meet the other side of humanity. The battle for Earth had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander J. Kara had fought in 17 campaigns across the galaxy, and never once had she felt fear. As for lesser species, and for those who didn't understand the mathematics of warfare, superior numbers and superior technology always want. Now her flagship twisted through space as human weapons tore apart the Council fleet around her. Ships that had dominated entire sectors were breaking apart under fire from vessels a quarter their size. Damage report, she barked. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 15. Her engineering officer reported, his voice cracked with panic. "Main weapons offline and shields at 30%. They're targeting our sensor arrays, sir, and we're fighting blind." Zia Chikara watched her tactical display dissolve into chaos. The human ships moved in patterns she couldn't predict. They didn't mass their forces for a decisive engagement. Like any rational military, instead, they split into small groups and attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously. Council ships moved to engage. They found nothing but debris and empty space. The humans had already moved on to strike somewhere else. "They fight like cowards," snarled her weapons officer. "Hit-and-run tactics are beneath civilized warfare." Jakara said nothing, because she was beginning to understand something terrifying. The humans weren't fighting like cowards. They were fighting smart. A proximity alarm screamed, and Gara looked up in time to see a human corvette appear directly above her. Flagship had been hiding in the debris field and using the wreckage of council ships as camouflage. Them corvette rolled and fired a spread of missiles at point blank range. 3 of them detonated against the flagship's weakened shields, and the 4th punched through. The bridge lights flickered and died, and emergency systems bathed everything in red. "All ships retreat." Jakara commanded. "Fall back to rally point 7. But there was no rally point 7 anymore. Human battle group had seized it 30 minutes ago and turned it into a killing field. 6 council ships had jumped there seeking safety and found swarms of human drones waiting. They had been torn apart before they could even charge their weapons. The battle for Earth lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 27 council ships had been destroyed and 41 more were crippled. Human losses were lighter than they had any right to. Bezkara's flagship limped away from Earth's orbit with 1/3 of her crew dead and her weapons systems melted slag. She had failed worse than failed. She had been humiliated by a species the Council had dismissed as primitive. Survivors of the Council fleet regrouped beyond the orbit of Neptune and licked their wounds. Shkata sat in her command throne and tried to process what had happened. Day transmission came through on her personal channel. It was Admiral Kowalski. His image appeared on her screen, and she saw an old human with hard eyes and no trace of mercy in his expression. "Commander Jakara," he said, "I'm transmitting the terms of your withdrawal. You will leave this system within 12 hours. You will take your damaged ships and your survivors, and you will return to Council space. If any Council vessel returns to Sol, they will be destroyed without warning." Zetakara's jaw plates ground together. "You cannot dictate terms to the Council," she said. "We are 7 species and billions strong. You are 1 world." Kowalski smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You came to our home and threatened our families," he said. "You expected us to roll over and accept slavery or death. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was thinking that because we wanted peace, we didn't understand war." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. "Humanity has been at war for its entire existence, Commander. We've fought each other in conflicts that make your campaigns look like children squabbling. We've developed weapons that horrify us and tactics that shame us. We tried to leave all that behind when we reached the stars. You brought it back." The transmission ended. Jakara gave the order to retreat. The Council fleet jumped away and left Earth's space for the first time in 3 days behind. Then the human ships patrolled the solar system like sharks in bloody water. But Admiral Kowalski wasn't finished, not even close to. Weeks after the battle for Earth, the Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all 7 species gathered in the Great Assembly Station that orbited a neutron star at the galaxy's edge. They argued and shouted and pointed fingers. The Valorians blamed the Tech for inadequate intelligence. Tech blamed the Shriel for inferior weapon systems. Shirel blamed the Valorians for incompetent tactics. While they argued, human ships appeared in Council space, not invasion fleets, but small surgical strike teams. They hit targets the Council hadn't thought to defend because no one had ever been audacious enough to strike this deep into civilized space. A tech research station studying jump drive technology was reduced to atoms by kinetic bombardment. Scientists never saw it coming. A Shriel ammunition depot on the border of their territory exploded. With enough force to register on seismic sensors, 3 star systems away a Valorian patrol base simply went dark. When reinforcements arrived, they found the station intact but empty. The entire crew of 300 had vanished, security footage showed. Human soldiers in advanced armor moving through the corridors like ghosts. They had taken the crew prisoner and erased every data core in the facility then. They left a single message scrawled on the command center wall in Valorian script we know. Where you live, panic spread through Council space. Earth could strike anywhere at any time, then nowhere was safe trade. Routes emptied as merchant ships. Refused to leave port colonies demanded additional military protection that the Council couldn't provide. 3 of the 7 Council species opened secret negotiations with Earth. Rook were a peaceful species who had been bullied into joining the Council's attack. They sued for peace immediately and offered reparations, accepted with the condition that the Hruk provide detailed intelligence on Council military capabilities. The Hruk agreed the Corvin Collective was a mercantile empire that valued profit over pride. They saw which way the war was turning and wanted to be on the winning side. They offered Earth's access to their trade networks in exchange for peace. Earth accepted, and suddenly human goods began flooding galactic markets. East were a hive mind species who had always been uncomfortable with the Council's aggressive policies. They withdrew from Council space entirely and declared neutrality. The Council was fracturing. Scar watched it happen from her quarters on the Valorian homeworld. She's been relieved of command pending an investigation into her failure. Other commanders who had survived Earth were facing similar fates. The Council needed scapegoats, and losing commanders were convenient targets. But Jakar knew the truth. They hadn't lost because of bad leadership or tactical errors. They had lost because they had fundamentally misunderstood what humans were. She spent her days reviewing the battle recordings and trying to learn the humans had used deception on a scale she had never imagined possible. Those 40 years of peaceful coexistence had been. Every human diplomat had been a spy. Every cultural exchange had been reconnaissance. Every trade mission had been covered for intelligence gathering. Humans had mapped Council technology and studied Council tactics. They had identified weaknesses and built weapons specifically designed to exploit them. The particle beams the Council relied on were useless against human ships coated in reflective armor. Missiles with predictable flight paths were easy prey for human a guided point defense. Communication networks the Council trusted had been compromised years ago. Humans had been listening to every strategic/discussion and reading every classified report. It was brilliant and ruthless, and it had worked perfectly. Scar accessed a restricted file that contained interviews with human prisoners captured during the early skirmishes. One interview stood out: a human pilot named Maria Santos sat in a detention cell and answered questions with a mix of defiance and exhaustion. "Why do you fight so hard?" the interrogator asked. "You cannot win against 7 species." Maria laughed. It was a bitter sound. 7 species who've never really been tested. She said, "You've spent the last 1,000 years bullying primitives and patting yourselves on the back. You forgot what real war looks like." "What is real war?" The interrogator pressed. Maria's expression went cold. "Real war is when you fight because the alternative is extinction," she said. "When you use every weapon and every trick and every dirty tactic because losing means your children die. You think we're vicious now? This is us holding back. This is us trying to make a point without committing genocide. You really don't want to see what happens if you push us past that line." The interrogation ended. Kara closed the file and sat in darkness. She understood now what the Council had unleashed. Humans weren't just good at war was woven into their DNA. They clawed their way to the top of their food chain on a death. A world where everything tried to kill them. They had survived ice ages and megadroughts and super volcano eruptions. They had fought each other in conflicts that raged for decades. They had split atoms and built machines that could end their world, and they had chosen peace anyway, until the Council forced their hand. A message arrived on Ashkara. As personal terminal, it was marked with Admiral Kowalski's seal. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a simple text message and a set of coordinates. Lieutenant Maria Santos gripped the controls of her fighter as it screamed through the debris field surrounding the Valorian Gate. The gate was a massive structure that controlled access to the galactic core, and whoever held it controlled the most valuable trade routes in known space. The Council had built it 300 years ago and considered it impregnable today. Humanity was going to prove them wrong. "Red Squadron, form up on me," Maria commanded, Her voice was calm despite the fact that her heart hammered against her ribs. 6 fighters fell into formation behind her. They were all that remained of a squadron that had started the war with 20 pilots. "I have multiple bogies inbound," her wingman called out. "Looks like a full defense." Screen Maria checked her tactical display. 40 Council fighters were vectoring toward them, and behind those fighters were the gate's defensive batteries. Enough firepower to vaporize a moon copy, that she said, "Execute pattern Delta 7 on my..." Marker fingers danced across the controls and armed a weapons package that technically didn't exist. Human scientists had been busy during the war. They had taken Council technology and twisted it into shapes the original designers never imagined. Result was weapons that violated half a dozen galactic treaties. Not humanity cared about treaties anymore, Mark, Maria said dread. Squadrons split apart and dove in 7 different directions. The Council fighters tried to track them, but human ships were smaller and faster. They'd been built for war and nothing else. Maria's fighter twisted through a gap in the debris field that was barely wider than her ship. Metal screamed against her shields as she clipped a chunk of destroyed station end. She was through and accelerating toward the nearest Council fighter. Her targeting system locked on, and she fired. Missile that launched from her fighter carried a warhead filled with programmable nanomachnesty struck the Council fighters' shields, and instead of exploding, they spread across the energy field like oil on water. Within seconds, they had analyzed the shield frequency and created a sympathetic resonance. Shield collapsed. Maria's second missile hit bare hole in the Council fighter came apart in a flash of white fire. 1 down. She reported around her the battle raged in 3 dimensions. Council ships outnumbered the humans 4-1, but numbers weren't everything. Human pilots flew with a desperation that bordered on madness. They took risks that no sane being would attempt. They sacrificed their ships to take out high-value targets. They died in seconds for their wingmates to complete the mission. Maria had been fighting for 6 months, and she had seen things that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had watched her training squadron get wiped out in the defense of Mars. She had seen colony ships full of refugees torn apart by Council missiles. She had held her best friend while she bled out in the wreckage of her fighter. The Council thought humans fought with such ferocity because they were savages. They were wrong. Humans fought this way because they had something worth dying for. "Gate defenses are activating," someone called out. "I'm reading massive energy spikes." The Valorian gate was more than just a station. It was a weapons platform that could project force across an entire sector. Its main batteries could crack the crust of a planet. Targeting a few dozen fighters should have been trivial, but the gate's targeting systems had been designed to track large ships moving at predictable speeds. Human fighters were neither large nor predictable. They jinked and rolled and used every scrap of debris as covered the gate's batteries fired, and beams of concentrated energy lanced through space. 2 human fighters vanished in bursts of ionized particles, but the rest kept coming. Maria armed her main payload and checked the timer. "All units, this is Red Leader," she transmitted. "I'm starting my run. Cover me for 90 seconds. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. Her fighter dove toward the gate and weaving between the defensive batteries. Energy beams tracked her movements, but she was flying on instinct. Now every dodge and roll was automatic. Her hands in the ship were one, and she flowed through the killing field like water through a netha. Gate's central hub grew larger, and her canopy it was a sphere 1/2 kilometer across and covered in weapons emplacements and sensor arrays somewhere. Inside that sphere was the control center that managed the jump. Gate network destroy it, and the Council's logistics would collapse. Maria's fighter shuddered as a near miss overloaded her shields. Warning lights flashed across her console. Her reactor was running hot, and her life support was failing. She had maybe 2 minutes before the ship came apart around her. Would have to be enough. Target locked. Her computer announced. Maria fired the weapon that deployed from her fighter. Looked like a simple missile. It was inside. Its warhead was a compact fusion device surrounded by a shell of exotic matter. When it detonated, the blast would be contained and directed inward. The result would be a tiny artificial black hole that existed for approximately 0.3 seconds, more than long enough to devour the gate's control center. Missiles streaked toward its target. Council point defense systems tracked it and fired 3. Particle beams converged on the missile. It should have been destroyed instead. It split into 7 separate warheads. 6 of them were decoys that scattered in different directions. 7th was the real weapon, and it slipped through the defensive fire. Maria pulled her fighter into a hard turn and burned. Her engines at maximum power. She needed distance between herself and the gate behind her. The missile struck home and detonated. For a moment, nothing happened then. The center of the Valorian gate simply ceased to exist. A sphere of darkness appeared and swallowed matter and energy with equal hunger. The gate's structure twisted and buckled as it was pulled toward the artificial singularity. Metal screamed in atmosphere. Vented in great plumes of frozen gas, the black hole collapsed as quickly as it had formed when it vanished. The gate was a ruin. Its central hub was gone, and its defensive batteries were offline debris. Drifted in the silence of space, target destroyed. Maria reported. Her voice sounded distant, even to her own ears. Gate is down. The Council fleet that had been rushing to reinforce the gate's defenders suddenly had nowhere to go without the gate. They couldn't jump to the core systems. They were stranded in hostile space with a human battle group bearing down on them. The Battle of the Valorian Gate lasted another 4 hours. By the time it ended, the Council had lost 63 ships and 7,000 personnel. Human losses were lighter, but still brutal. 400 pilots had died by in victory. Maria Santos made it back to her carrier with a ship held together by prayers and emergency patches. When she climbed out of the cockpit, her legs wouldn't hold. Hera medic caught her before she hit the deck. "You did it, Lieutenant," the medic said. "The gate is ours." Maria nodded, but felt no triumph, just exhaustion and the weight of all the friends she had lost on Earth. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in her office and watched the casualty report scroll across her screen. The gate was a major victory, but the cost made her sick. She had returned from Council captivity. 3 months ago, they had released her when the war turned, and humanity no longer looked like easy. Pray she wished they had kept her locked up, Pat. At least then she wouldn't have to watch young people die for mistakes diplomats had made. Her office door opened and Admiral Kowalski entered. He looked older than she remembered. The war was aging. "All of them, we need to talk about the next phase," he said. Sarah gestured to a chair, and he sat with a grunt. "The Council is fragmenting," he continued. 3 species have already made peace, and 2 more are on the verge. Only the Valorians are still committed to fighting. "That's good, isn't it?" Sarah asked. Kowalski shook his head. "The Valorians are desperate, and desperate enemies are dangerous. Our intelligence suggests they're developing a doomsday weapon, something that could destabilize a star." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "They wouldn't." She said they would absolutely glass their own worlds before surrendering. Kowalski replied, "Pride matters more than survival to them. What do? We end this war before they can deploy the weapon," he said. "That means taking the fight to their homeworld." Sarah stood and walked to the window below her. The ruins of Geneva stretched to the horizon. The Council's initial bombardment had killed 2 billion people in the first week of the war. Most of Earth's major cities were ruined. Survivors lived in underground shelters and emerged only when the air raid sirens were silent. "How many more have to die?" "James," she asked quietly. "As many as it takes," he said. There was no pleasure in his voice, just grim acceptance. "If we stop now, the Council will rebuild and come back stronger. We have to break them completely, make them understand that humanity can never be threatened again." Sarah turned to face him. "And what does that make us?" she asked. "What kind of species commits genocide to ensure its own survival?" "A living one," Kowalski said. He stood and moved to join her at the window. "I hate this, Sarah." He continued, "I hate what we've become, and I hate what this war is doing to us. But the alternative is extinction. The Council came to our home and tried to exterminate us. We didn't start this fight, but by God, we're going to finish it." Sarah closed her eyes. She knew he was right. She had seen the Council's true nature when they delivered their ultimatum. They didn't view humanity as equals. They viewed humans as obstacles to be removed or resources to be exploited. Peace had never been possible, not really. The Council only understood strength, and humanity had learned to speak their language. "What do you need from me?" she asked. The Valorian homeworld of Valkyr Prime hung in space like a jewel of blue and green from orbit. It looked peaceful, beautiful, even. Commander Gara stood at the window of her apartment in the capital city and watched the stars somewhere up there. The human fleet was coming. She had seen the intelligence reports. 300 ships had massed at the edge of Valorian space and were advancing steadily. The council fleet that had once numbered in the thousands was scattered and broken. Lady, the Valorians remained to face humanity's wrath. Mother, the sirens are sounding again. Her daughter said from the Durwai Sakura, turned to see Shkala standing there with worry in her eyes. She was only 12 cycles old and had known nothing but war for the past year. Is just a drill, Jakara lied. Go back to your room, Shkala. Didn't move. The other children say the humans are going to kill us all, she said. They say humans eat their enemies and wear their bones as trophies. Jakara crossed the room and knelt before her daughter. Humans don't eat people, she said gently. They're not monsters, then why are we fighting them? It was a good question, one that Shkara had asked herself 1,000 times. Why had the council attacked Earth? Why had they assumed a species that had reached the stars through perseverance and ingenuity would be easy prey? Why had pride blinded them to the danger? Because we made a mistake, Jakara said finally. A terrible mistake, and now we're paying for it. She pulled her daughter close and held her outside. The sirens wailed and people rushed to the shelters. The human fleet was 6 days away, on the bridge of the human flagship. Indomitable Admiral Kowalski reviewed the final battle plans around him. His senior staff worked in silence. Everyone knew what was at stake. Intelligence reports that Valkar Prime has a planetary shield, his tactical officer said. It's rated to withstand sustained bombardment for up to 72 hours. We won't need 72 hours. Kowalski replied, What's the status of the infiltration teams? Team Alpha is in position, sir, came the response. They've accessed the shield generator control systems. On your command, they can introduce a virus that will create gaps in the coverage. Kowalski nodded. The infiltration teams had been inserted into Valkyr Prime 3 months ago. They had posed as refugees from species the Valorians had conquered. It was a risky gambit, but it had worked now. They sat in the heart of the enemy capital and waited for the signal to strike. What about the doomsday weapon? Kowalski asked his intelligence officer. Pulled up a holographic display. We've located it, sir, she said. It's in a bunker complex on the northern continent. The device is designed to destabilize Valkyr's sun. If they activate it, the star will go nova within 48 hours. Can we disable it? Team Beta is moving into position now, she replied. They report heavy security, but they believe they can reach the device. Kowalski studied the display. The doomsday weapon was humanity's nightmare scenario. If the Valorians activated it, they would take their entire system with them. 6 planets and 40 billion civilians all dead rather than surrender. Tell Team Beta they are authorized to use any means necessary, he said. That device cannot be allowed to activate back on Earth. The Terran Assembly was in session. Dar Sarah Chen stood at the podium and faced 500 representatives from across human space. The chamber was tense. We stand at a crossroads, she said. Her voice echoed in the vast room. In 6 days, we will arrive at the Valorian homeworld. What we do there will define humanity for generations to come. A representative from the Mars delegation stood. The Valorians tried to exterminate us, he said. They showed no mercy when they bombarded our cities. Why should we show them any? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah raised her hand for silence. Because mercy is not weakness, she said, it's strength. The council attacked us because they saw us as primitive and violent. If we respond with genocide, we prove them right.
Ow.
Another representative stood, this one from the Europa colonies. With respect, Dr. Chen, the people of Europa watched their habitat domes shatter under council fire. 30 million dead in the first hour of the war. Those people deserve justice. They deserve revenge, someone else shouted. The chamber erupted into argument. Sarah stood at the podium and waited for the noise to subside. When it finally did, she spoke quietly. My husband died in the bombardment of Geneva. She said. The room went silent. He was a teacher, she continued. He spent his life trying to make the world better. When the council ships opened fire, he was helping children evacuate to the shelters. He got 43 kids to safety before the building collapsed. They found his body 3 days later. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I want the Valorians to pay for what they did, she said. I want them to Suffer the way we suffered, but more than that, I want to build something better than what we had before. I want a galaxy where species talk instead of fight, where differences are negotiated instead of bombed into submission, and that starts. With us making a choice, do we become conquerors, or do we become something better? Long silence followed. Finally, a representative from the Luna cities stood. "What are you proposing, Dr. Chen?" she asked. Shara took a deep breath. "I propose we offer the Valorians' terms," she said, "complete demilitarization in exchange for their survival. We occupy their homeworld and we dismantle their weapons, but we don't exterminate them. Show them that humanity can be merciful." The chamber exploded in two. Debate. Some representatives supported the Planethers, called it naive and dangerous. The vote was scheduled for the next day. Commander Kara sat in a military briefing room, deep beneath the Valorian capital. Around her sat the remnants of the councils. High command generals and admirals who had once commanded vast fleets, now they presided over defeat. "The human fleet will arrive in 5 days. The Supreme Commander," said he, was an old warrior, with scars covering his face. "Our defenses will hold for perhaps 2 days, then they will breach the shield, and bombardment will begin." "We still have the stellar weapon," someone suggested. The room went quiet. "If we activate it, Valkyr dies." Gara said, "Along with every living thing in this system, better death than slavery," the Supreme Commander replied. "The Valorian Empire will not bow to primitives." Jakara slammed her fist on the table. "Those primitives have destroyed 7 council fleets," she said. "They've conquered half the galaxy in less than a year. They're not primitive, and they're not going away." "You would have us surrender?" the Supreme Commander asked. His tone was dangerous. "I would have us survive," Jsara replied, "so our children can have a future." The Supreme Commander stood. "The decision has been made," he said. "If the humans breach our defenses, we activate the stellar weapon. Valkyr will burn before we surrender." He left the room. Skara sat in stunned silence. "They were going to kill everyone. 40 billion civilians would die because of pride." She thought of her daughter and felt sick. There had to be another way that night. Jakara made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year ago. She accessed the military communication network and sent a tightly encrypted message to the approaching human fleet. The message was simple: "I am Commander Jakara, formerly of the Council Fleet. I have information about the Valorian doomsday weapon. I wish to defect." She sent the message and waited 3 hours later. A reply came through. It was from Admiral Kowalski himself. "Commander Zia Chikara, your offer is accepted. Transmit the location of the stellar weapon and details of its activation sequence. In exchange, we guarantee safety for you and your family." Gara stared at the message. This was treason. She would be reviled by her own people. Her name would be cursed for generations, but her daughter would live. She transmitted everything she knew about the doomsday weapon schematics and activation codes and guard rotations. When she finished, she gathered her daughter and what few possessions they could carry. A human shuttle would extract them before the attack begins. They fled into the night. Jakara looked back at the city where she had been born. She wondered if she would ever see it again. Probably not. The humans would occupy Valkyr, and the old order would be swept away. Everything she had known would be gone, but Shkala would survive. That was what mattered. And the indomitable Admiral Kowalski reviewed Zetakara's intelligence. "The weapon is more advanced than we thought," his science officer said. "If they activate it, we won't have time to evacuate. The star will go critical within hours. Then we make sure they don't activate it," Kowalski said. "Team Beta will neutralize the weapon before we begin the attack, and if they fail, sir..." Kowalski looked at the tactical display. Vakar Prime glowed on the screen. "Billions of lives hung in the balance. If they fail, we all die," said simply. "The team knows this. They won't fail." Deep in the northern continent of Valkyr Prime, a team of 6 human special operations soldiers moved through underground tunnels. They'd been working toward this moment for 3 months now. They were a kilometer from the doomsday weapon bunker. "I'm reading heavy security ahead," their tech specialist whispered. "Looks like they reinforced after detecting our infiltration teams." The team leader checked his weapon. "We go loud." Then he said fast and hard, "If they activate that weapon before we can disable it, they won't," the team leader interrupted. We've come too far to fail now. They moved forward into the darkness behind them. The fate of billions rested on their shoulders above. Then the human fleet drew closer, and across the galaxy humanity held its breath, waiting to see if peace was possible, if the only option left was ashes. The human special operations team breached the bunker at exactly 0300 local time. Explosions lit up the underground complex as shaped charges blew through. Reinforced Duer's Valorian guards responded with trained efficiency, but they were facing humanity's best 6 soldiers against 48. Should have been a massacre. It was just. It's not the one the Valorians expected. The human team moved like water through the bunker corridors there. Armor made them nearly invisible to sensors, and their weapons fired in. Whisper quiet burst. Each shot was precise and economical. Within 90 seconds, half the guards were down. Rest fell back to defensive positions around the Doomsday weapon itself. The team leader checked his tactical display. The weapon sat in a chamber 30 meters ahead between them, and it were 20 Valorian elite guards, armed with plasma rifles. Suggestions. He asked his team. We could try to negotiate, someone said, or we could use the charges. The team leader shook his head. Charges might damage the weapons control systems, he said. We need it intact so we can disable it properly. Then we do this the hard way. Their heavy weapons specialist said. She pulled out a device that looked like a metal disc. When activated, it would generate a localized electromagnetic pulse. Everything electronic within 20 meters would be fried, including the team's own equipment. Do it, the team leader ordered. The specialist activated the device and tossed it down the corridor. 3 seconds later, the EMP detonated. Lights died, and equipment sparked and failed. The Valorian guards' weapons went dead in their hands. Their armor's targeting systems went dark. For a moment there was silence. Then the humans came out of the darkness they had trained for fighting without electronic hand-to-hand combat and zero visibility. They moved by muscle memory and instinct. The Valorians never had a chance. 2 minutes later, the team leader stood before the Doomsday weapon. It was a massive device that filled the entire chamber. Crystalline components hummed with barely contained energy. Status, he demanded. Their tech specialist was already working on the control panel. It's on standby, she reported. They haven't activated it yet, but the countdown is armed. Long do we have? If someone triggers it from remote command, we'll have maybe 10 seconds before it goes critical. Can you disable it? The specialist's fingers flew across the alien interface. I'm trying, she said, but this is technology I've never seen before. The activation sequence is encrypted with a quantum lock. Above them, the human fleet entered Volker's. Orbit Admiral Kowalski watched the planet fill his view screen. Status of Team Beta. He asked. They've reached the weapons, sir. His communications officer reported, working on disabling it now, and the planetary shield. Team Alpha reports ready to execute the virus upload on your command. Kowalski nodded. Everything was in position now. Came the hard part. He opened a channel to the Valorian military. Command, this is Admiral James Kowalski of the Terran Federation. He said, I'm transmitting terms of surrender. Stand down your defenses, and no further lives will be lost. The response came from the Valorian Supreme Commander. His face appeared on the screen, and his expression was one of pure hatred. We will never surrender to primitives, he snarled. Valkyr will die free rather than live as your slaves. I'm activating the stellar weapon now. In 2 days our sun will go nova and take your fleet with it. The channel went dead. Kowalski felt his blood.
Ow.
Run cold, Team Beta. He transmitted. The weapon is being activated remotely. You need to shut it down now in the bunker. The tech specialist swore as her display lit up with cascading alerts. It's starting the sequence, she said. I need more time. We don't have time, the team leader replied. He pulled out a plasma torch and moved to the weapons housing. What are you doing? The specialist demanded. If the controls won't work, we do this manually. He said. He began cutting through the crystal matrix that formed the weapons. Core alarms screamed throughout the bunker. The device's energy output spiked. You're going to cause a containment breach. The specialist shouted. Better a small explosion than a supernova, he replied. The plasma torch cut deeper. Crystalline fragments fell away and revealed the pulsing heart of the weapon. The team leader reached into the opening. His hands touched energy that should have killed him instantly. His armor's shielding held for exactly 3 seconds. That was enough. He grabbed the central control node and ripped it free. The weapon's hum died. The countdown stopped them. Team leader fell to his knees as his armor failed. His hands were burned black and his vital signs were flat Lynette. Medic rushed to him, but they both knew it was too late. Mission accomplished. He whispered, then he died on. The indomitable alarms suddenly went silent, sir. The science officer said, his voice was shaky. The stellar weapon has been neutralized. Confirmed deactivation. A ragged cheer went up from the bridge. Krukowalski closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of relief. Then he opened the channel to Volkar's surface again. Supreme Commander, he said, your doomsday weapon is offline. Your defenses are about to fail. You have one last chance to surrender. The Valorian leader's face appeared, and for the first time, Kowalski saw fear there. You're bluffing, the Supreme Commander said. The weapon cannot be disabled remotely. Didn't disable it remotely, Kowalski replied. We had a team inside your bunker for the past 3 months. They just gave their lives to save yours. Now stand down before I'm forced to do something. We'll both regret. The Supreme Commander's expression cycled through denial and rage and finally resignation. You win, he said quietly. The words seemed to physically pain him. Velkar surrenders. Gara watched from the human shuttle as the planetary shield flickered and died below the Valorian capital. Ships were landing carrying occupation forces. The war was over. The Valorian empire that had stood for 3,000 years had fallen in less than 12 months. Mother, what happens now? Shkala, a Skejkara, pulled her daughter close. Now we learn to live in a new galaxy, she said. One where humans make the rules on Earth, Dr. Sarah. Chen stood before the Terran assembly and waited for the vote. Chamber was silent as the results were tallied. Finally, the speaker announced the decision. The assembly has voted, she said, by a margin of 62% to 38%. We accept the policy of strategic occupation rather than total annihilation. The Valorian people will be spared, their military will be dismantled, but their civilians will be protected under Terran law. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks. Had won barely, but she had won humanity, had chosen mercy. Now came the harder part-making. That mercy means something. 5 years passed. The galaxy was unrecognizable. The Terran Federation controlled the major jump routes and enforced strict demilitarization across former Council space human ships, patrolled the space lanes, and ensured compliance. Former Council species lived under Terran law and chafed under restrictions they had once imposed on others, but they were alive. That counted for something. Maria Santos stood in front of a classroom on the rebuilt Mars colony. 30 students looked up at her with attention. Most of them were too young to remember the war. They knew it only from history lessons. Can anyone tell me why we study military history? Maria asked. A boy in the front row raised his hand. So we don't repeat our mistakes. Partly, Maria said. She walked to the window and looked out at the rust-colored landscape. We study it because peace has to be earned and defended. The Council thought we were weak because we wanted peace. We learned the hard way that peaceful and helpless are not the same thing. She turned back to the class. The scars on my body are from the war, she said. I carry them as a reminder. War is not glorious, and it's not heroic. It's necessary sometimes, but it always costs more than you want to pay. A girl raised her hand. Were you scared during the battles? Maria smiled. Sadly, every single time, she admitted. God. But I fought anyway, because the alternative was losing everything I loved. That's what courage is, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The class ended, and the students filed out. Maria gathered her materials and prepared for the next lesson. She didn't talk about her role in the war very often. It was too painful, but if sharing her experiences helped even one student understand the cost of conflict, it was worth it. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in her office at the Galactic Chancellor. The title still felt strange. She had been elected to lead the new galactic government by representatives from 18 different species. Her job was to ensure the peace held and to build something better than what the Council had been. Was exhausting work. Every day brought new challenges, border disputes and trade disagreements and cultural misunderstandings, but slowly progress was being made. The Accord of New Beginnings had established frameworks for cooperation. Species that had been enemies were learning to work together. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was better than war. Knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Commander Zedich Kara entered. She now served as an advisor to the Chancellery. and helped bridge the gap between human and non-human perspectives. I have the latest report from the Demilitarization Commission, Jakara said. The Valorian compliance rate has increased to 94%, Sarah nodded. That's good progress, she said. How are your people adjusting? Jakara hesitated. There is still resentment, she admitted. No. Many Valorians believe we should have fought to the last rather than surrender. They see cooperation with the Federation as betrayal. Do you think Sarah Sheshkara was quiet for a moment? I think my daughter has a future now, she said finally.